Couple that in with all the censorship, and the damage they can do is limitless. No Brad Cooper, but celebrities defending it. Oh man, they gon' say I'm racist, but they call everybody racist. I guess that mean nobody is racist. Now it doesn't mean much when you say it. When you say it, they gon' say you racist, but they call everybody racist. I guess that mean nobody is racist. Now it doesn't mean much when you say it. They make you think that there's no way you can...
Did you hear that, folks? They're going to call everybody racist. Does it mean much? Should you run and hide? You know, there's a whole lot of white guilt and a whole lot of white liberals that they bought into this idea. And I believe that we should just, regardless of the color of the skin, treat everybody like people. And if they're nice people, if they're polite, if they're smart, if you have something in common, you should be friends with them. And if they're jerks, maybe you treat them a little differently and you're not friends. But it should be based upon character. And the idea that the left believes and already knows that I'm a racist because of the color of my skin, isn't that anti-racism? Because my understanding is racism comes in every color, every form. Really, it's, do you judge people by the color of their skin? Well, if you do, I want to judge people by the content of their character. The left used to embrace this. Instead, they constantly call racist. Oh, maybe I should be a rapper. No, folks, I won't put you through that. Nonetheless, Kamala Harris has had now one media appearance. One. Trump has a couple a day. She just wants to go to scripted, where she can read off the teleprompter rallies, but has only went to one softball interview with Dana Bash. And Dana padded the questions for her. She needed her emotional support animal to sit there next to her to help her, Tim Walsh. Because, let's see, your first interview, and you can't really answer questions. Oh, my values haven't changed, but my positions on fracking have. Go look it up. Go watch that interview. It's only 18 minutes, which is kind of pitiful. Your first one since you were nominated as president, 40 days, thereabouts, and you only spent 18 minutes, and they claim that it was live, but if you watch it, you can tell it's been cut multiple times. So it's not live. That's like, it's just more smoke and mirrors. It's not actually live. And it's weird that she brought the vice president, again, her emotional support animal, there, I guess, in case she got nervous. We were told since she's become president that she is the most competent, most qualified, most positive, most joyous presidential candidate ever. She's just the best. And it's amazing that she was able to pull this off, because just a little while ago, she was thought of as by the left, by the liberal media, she was thought of as the worst vice president ever. That Biden should replace her. And then somehow she found a way to replace Biden. That's pretty interesting. She always seems to rise to the top, yet often talks gibberish. Really leads you to have a lot of questions as to how did she get there? Because if your side sees you as not very competent, and then all of a sudden when you get the nomination, you're the best thing ever, how'd you get there? Maybe it's because all that matters to the left is Trump derangement syndrome and winning and power, not policy. I don't think they would care what position she had. Like, she used to have a position that said she was going to end fracking. And in that debate, in that interview, she was asked about that. My values haven't changed, but I would not stop fracking. Yet in 2019, She said, we will stop all fracking. Fracking is extracting oil in a particular way that is particularly efficient and allows us to get more oil and natural gas out, allowing us to be a more productive country. Something else that's interesting is you not only will they call you racist, but they will say the Democrats are the party of democracy. Well, we're a representative republic, first of all. So the party of democracy wants to pack the Supreme Court, meaning adding more members because they're not getting their way, and this is their way of having a tizzy fit, and including Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. They've threatened to do so. This party of democracy, they always have a fit that it's a electoral college. They want it to be straight popular vote. Well, the reason that our founding fathers went to the electoral college, I think, is sound. It slows things down, and it allows rural places to have a say. Look, big population centers have still more say, but if it was truly just a democracy, they would have all the say. And so this is a way of dividing power. This is one of the brilliances of our Constitution, that it divides power in multiple ways and then empowers the people with all of the rest of the power, which is totally cool. So this party of democracy decided that they couldn't win with Joe Biden. So they dumped him. They threatened him with the 25th Amendment, meaning 25th Amendment is set up so that if a president is truly not able to continue as president, he would be forced to step down, that Congress would remove him. Interestingly enough, they threatened him with it, but then they cut a deal where he gets to remain president. So he's still president, but he's not competent to run for president. Should the man have the nuclear codes? I don't know. After watching the debate and him getting severely confused, there were times where I had no idea what he was trying to say. And even the media, liberal media, all agreed, ooh, that was a terrible debate performance, and Joe is struggling. And they finally admitted, yeah, Joe's got to go. Well, if Joe's got to go, shouldn't he not be president anymore? And there's been signs of this for those that are willing, that have their eyes open, and they're paying attention of this for 5 years. Because I did some research before he ran. And if you go back 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 years, how Joe spoke, he was still a gibbering fool, but it was coherent. It kept losing more and more coherence. And he clearly is not keeping things straight. For instance, he thought the pyramids were in South America. Yikes. You know, the Egyptian pyramids. He gets heads of state wrong. Why should this man be there? Well, the big deal, one, it's scary that somebody that really is not competent is our president and goes to call it a day at 4 p.m. every day and has spent almost 40% of his time on the beach, or I should say on vacation, not necessarily on the beach, is that our vice president just very recently, a month and a half ago, maybe 60 days ago, maybe 2 months ago, talked about how Joe is just sharp as a tack. So she had to have known. So the party of democracy set this up. They dumped Joe without actually dumping Joe. They installed Kamala without her ever getting a single vote. Not one. Except from the delegates. So she didn't go through the primary process. The party of democracy stopped anybody that wanted to campaign in New Hampshire because they decided that South Carolina should be the first state. So anybody that campaigned during the Democratic primary in New Hampshire would lose all of their electoral college votes. That sounds like the party of democracy. The party of democracy has superdelegates, meaning delegates that have more than one vote. That represents about a 30% of the total of delegates. So you've got a 30% cabal that's only in the Democratic Party, the party of democracy. You mean the party that's doing its best to take Cornel West, who is a left-wing nut running as an independent, off the ballot in a whole bunch of states? The party of democracy that did its best to keep RFK and his party off of as many ballots as possible. First, they ran him out as a potential Democratic candidate, and then they tried to keep him when he was running as an independent off the ballots. That's the party of democracy. Wasn't that crazy? So getting a little more to policy. And Kamala avoids policy. But she did manage to do a couple things. First, she stole no tax on tips. Now, Trump, like 3 months ago, talked about no tax on tips. And you can find it on camera. And suddenly she went, I can steal this. Well, if Joe's not competent and she's vice president, what's stopping Kamala from implementing no tax on tips right now? Then J.D. Vance came out with a $5,000 first year of childhood tax credit for parents, because it's really particularly expensive the first year of a child because you're buying all these things, getting stuff set up. And Kamala went, well, like a typical Democrat, we can spend more money than that. We're going to give it $6,000. But again, she could go to Congress and try to get something done. And now she's beginning to talk about how she would build a border wall. You know, open borders, border czar. Kamala Harris is talking about building a border wall. Now, we had 3.5 years, a little bit more, of her ignoring the border, refusing to go to the border, wanting no part of the border. And suddenly, she's going to build a border wall. Again, if Joe's not competent, who's in charge? You'd think that'd be the vice president. Why doesn't she get started right now? Put some actions behind your words. A comparison. Now, again, I'm not thrilled with Trump going with 15 weeks on abortion. But compared to the Democrats, you realize at the Democratic National Convention, inside the border wall they created, so there are 4 border walls sometimes, but not to protect our country, but they needed a border wall to keep out largely the woke leftists and the Palestinian woke leftists primarily out of the convention, so they wouldn't have any events during the convention. Inside that area, inside the border wall, they had a Planned Parenthood truck, just in case somebody needed an abortion at the Democratic National Convention. So let's see. Trump's flawed on abortion. The Democrats are so concerned with abortion that they wanted it at the DNC, so you could get an abortion while you're there. Wow. And Tim, the vice president she chose, wanted abortion on demand all the way up to birth. And he signed a bill in Minnesota about that. So she picks somebody that is the worst on abortion. That's kind of crazy. We'll continue this discussion. We're going to go ahead Constitutionalist here on 1550 KXX, the best talk in town. Thank you for watching on social media. I love the podcast version. As much as the radio is fun, I love the visual. I love being able to watch it. And I'm grateful that all of these people tune in. I get 1,000 or more views per week. And you could help me out and help the show grow by commenting, by liking, by subscribing, by hitting the bell notifications, and by sharing. Let's go ahead and come back. This is the Constitutionalist here on 1550 KXX, the best talk in town. I've got something that it's a blast from the past. I've played this song before, but I just love this song. It's by Lulu Bell and Scotty. Yeah, that was a group in the early 50s, and in 1952 they came out with this song called I Ain't No Communist.
That's the finest place on earth, but some folks don't appreciate this land that gave them birth. I hear that up in Washington they're having an awful fuss, 'cause communists and spies are making monkeys out of us. The bureaus and departments have been busy night and day. They're figuring out just how we gave our secrets all away. And Congress has appointed a committee, so they said, to find out who's American and who's a low-down red. They call him up to Washington to speak for Uncle Sam, but when they ask them what they are, they shut up like a clam. I wish they'd take and put me on the witness stand today. I'd shout so loud old Stalin could hear me all the way. I'm no communist, I'll tell you that right now. I believe a man should own his own house and car and cow. I like this private ownership, I want to be left alone. Let the government run its business and let me run my own. Our government is bigger than it ever was today. The more they hire to work for it, the more they have to pay. Our public servants should be proud and honest, you would think, instead of taking bribes and dressing up their wives and men. The taxes keep on going up, of that there is no doubt, but still they just can't take it in as fast as they dish it out. Our national debt is monster size and growing every day. Our children's children still unborn are gonna have to pay. Our dollar used to be the soundest money on this earth, but now $2 won't even buy one good dollar's worth. Unless we stop inflation and take care of what we've got, the communists may win the fight and never fire a shot. Oh, I'm no communist, I'll tell you that right now. I believe a man should own his own house and car and cow. I like this private ownership, I want to be left alone. Let the government run its business and let me run my own.
Never more true than today. Interesting that in 1952, that classic was made that understood the problems. Communism hasn't changed. We've have these two different perspectives. One's about small government and about individual liberty, and the other seems to be about growing government, having more control, authoritarianism, having a ruling elite, which we very much have a ruling elite up in Washington. And are the Democrats really the party of the common man? I would contend that, well, they give away money to the common man. All that money does is enslave them. It puts them on a kind of a plantation where they give them just enough in exchange for their vote. But people don't meet their potential when they're on welfare. Now, should there be a hand up? Yes. Do I want a hand out? Almost never. Not from the government anyway. I do believe we have a moral obligation to help those in need and try to give them a hand up. Not at the government level, at a personal level. I volunteered for 8 years at a boys' home. It made me more grateful. That's the single most important thing it did. It changed me in that it made me grateful for the blessings in my life. Now, it felt good to do some good things and be positive, but it put everything in perspective. Now, getting back to this comparing. The Democrats seem to be, lately, LGBTQ seems to be the most important thing. Joe Biden and Kamala, but mostly Joe Biden, has said it's the most important issue of our time. Really? We have the potential of World War III, and it's the most important issue. So Republicans generally support family and marriage. Democrats What do they support? Well, transing kids. To me, that's not okay. You want to do that as an adult, but okay. You want to do that as a kid, that's child abuse, because you're talking about cutting parts off a kid and sterilizing a kid. And you eventually kids are, if they're on hormone blockers long enough, they become sterile. We don't know long-term implications beyond the fact that it makes them sterile. And chopping parts, not a good idea. And that's the place where I'm sitting here in liberal California, where we're a sanctuary state. If a kid decides that parents are not doing what they want about LGBTQ, the state will take and steal a kid from another state. I don't know whether this will stand up in court, but this is state law. They're willing to steal another state. So is Minnesota. You know, where Tim Walz, vice president with Kamala Harris, well, vice president-elect, and let's hope never vice president, resides. They're willing to steal kids. This is a value that the Democrats stand for. When you have pride parades, I've been to one here in Fresno, in our Tower District, so right in Central California. It was definitely not age appropriate for children. Yet there were lots of children there, and I watched men in bondage, walking on leashes, other men in dog-like masks. Now, they were barely covered. Let's say 98% of their bodies were naked. There were also completely naked men at this parade, and some completely naked women. Right there. And that seems to be what the Democrats are for. Not common sense, not age appropriate. What about parental rights? And we compare the Democrats to the Republicans. Well, we have a former governor, Terry McAuliffe of Virginia, former governor. Glenn Youngkin won against him in Virginia. One of the things he said during the debate, and I've heard Newsom say this, I've heard Kamala say this, is they're not your kids. Kamala says they're the kids of the community. They're all our kids. Wait a minute. Those are your kids. You raised them, cleaned them, fed them, worked on educating them. Those are your kids. And anything that's serious that's happening, whether it's LGBTQ or anything else, you should be informed, particularly if the school knows if something happens, if something changes. Well, if a kid decides to have pronouns, in California, the teachers have to hide that. They have to lie to the parents if the parents ask directly. The teachers have to, the school districts have to keep secrets. So here in Commie, California, interesting that Kamala's from Commie, California. That's policy, just written into state law. Now, I do believe this is going to court. I do believe that more and more people have had enough, that they did this midterm, and I truly hope that people get out and make them suffer the consequences. What about the border? If we compare the two parties. One wants an open border. We saw somewhere between, say, 12 million and 20 million people since Joe Biden has come into office, so in the last 3.5 years, have come in. Because it's a bad optic for them, they've said, well, border crossings are down. But not really, because what they've done instead is there's this app. They go to the app, they sign up, and they get to fly in for free. Their first act is to take some money, $2,000 basically to start, and a phone, and a free ride to wherever they want in the U.S. And that's the border policy, except we don't know whether those people really want to become American citizens, want to embrace the melting pot, whether they believe in individual liberty or believe in some other form of government, though that's probably an unfair test because I'm not sure that a large number of the Democrats believe in individual liberty at this point. they believe in communism or authoritarianism or government control. Doesn't really matter what we call it. I mean, it is fun to say California Kamala. Say it 3 times fast. But does it really matter? What about on our only ally in the Middle East that is a democracy, that is fairly liberal democracy and tolerant? Do we support the Palestinians? Or do we support Israel? I believe that the Republicans generally support Israel. Of course, there's exceptions. And the Democrats generally support Palestine. Though, again, there's some exceptions. Do you know that you can be LGBTQ in Israel and they don't throw you off the roof or kill you or behead you or anything? I mean, it's crazy. But if you're gay in Palestine, they throw you off the roof. They cut off your head. Do you know that you can be an Israeli citizen and be Muslim? Full citizen. Some of them are even in their parliament. Can you be an Israeli in Palestine? Or an American? Why, no, they take you hostage at best. At worst, they rape and kill you. So that's a pretty profound difference whether we support, and I'm not saying Israel's perfect, but whether we support a liberal democracy that actually lives tolerance, or we support a group that is willing to kill and behead people, is willing to place soldiers in hospitals, in schools. Are you aware that up till this October 7th, a little after October 7th, because we had the disaster at October 7th where Palestine struck, that Israel had not been inside the Palestinian territory for something like 15 years, but we talk about occupied territory? Are you aware that the other nations that border Palestine, why they put up a wall? You know why they put up a wall? Because those people are crazy. Because all of those surrounding countries, so something like Egypt and Jordan and Syria, they won't accept Palestinians into their country because they see them as troublemakers and they see them as crazy. Which side should we be on? Well, we know which side the Republicans are on. Shifting to something that's a little more at home, energy production. I believe Trump says, drill, baby, drill. And Kamala, she totally wanted to cut fracking. Now, supposedly, she's for fracking, though her values are exactly the same. They want cutbacks. We got to use less oil. You know, even when it's fairly clean burning natural gas. We've got to enter into agreements like the Paris Accord, the New Green Deal, according to Kamala, according to the Democrats, that exempt countries like India and China, which are the 2 largest polluters in the world. Us and Western Europe could cut emissions by 100%. And compared to how much pollution is coming out of India and China, it wouldn't matter. That's a scary thought. So we're holding ourselves back so that other countries can do well and not holding them accountable. If climate change is real, and I believe that climate's always changing, but the man-made aspect of it is a lot more questionable, and whether too much CO2 is as bad a thing as they're claiming is highly questionable, because we're finding that the world is greening, meaning fringe areas for plants, deserts. They're greening. Not the center of the desert, but the edges. They're all greening because plants do really well with CO2. So, Republican policy, they want to make energy affordable. We're not getting away from oil yet. We don't have the solution. Solar's not going to work. Only works part of the time. If you put it over ground, it sterilizes the ground and kills every bird that flies over top. We don't have a good way to recycle the panels when they're dead. And the ground underneath is sterilized. You know, cooked to a certain temperature and kills all microorganisms and everything in the soil. And doesn't work that well because we don't have efficient batteries to save that solar. Not at a large scale. For household scale on the top of your roof, well, there shouldn't be any bugs on the top of your roof anyway. Small scale solar makes sense. Large scale doesn't make sense. What about wind? Because the left is constantly talking about wind energy. There's some problems. Kills a lot of birds. Drives whales crazy when you have it out in the ocean. And we have no way to recycle all of those propellers that rotate. We haven't figured that out. And if there's no wind, you got no power. Great example of that is there was a major storm in, I believe it was West Texas. Definitely Texas. I believe it was West Texas. And they essentially cut back their gas and oil ways of producing energy. They'd gone more with wind energy. You have a major disaster, you have a major storm, and it knocks a bunch of stuff out. And now there was, after the storm, no wind. So they didn't have power for several days, or not enough power that they could power most of the homes. And everybody suffered. The rest of the world is going to continue using oil. I think that oil should be made here because we're cleaner about how we produce it, how we process it, what we do with the byproducts than anywhere else in the world. So we could be the leader there, and we were briefly during Trump, meaning we were the number one oil producer, and we didn't have to import that oil from across the world, all the energy and resources it takes, say, to bring that oil from the Middle East or from Russia, or where we had to beg the communist country Venezuela for oil because we didn't have quite enough because the Biden administration, i.e. Biden-Harris administration, did everything they could to create more regulation and to make it harder for oil companies to get loans, to stop everything from happening. Another huge one, the difference between Republicans and Democrats. Free speech. Free speech kind of versus censorship. It's very clear through the Twitter files, and you can look up Twitter files, particularly Matt Taibbi and what is Schellenberger's first name? Doesn't come to me. Both independent, traditional leftists that got a whole bunch of information. They went in, Elon Musk, when he bought Twitter, turned them loose and said, look around and see what's been happening. So they're independent journalists. It's very clear that our U.S. government, on multiple levels, multiple three-letter agencies, including the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, was paying Twitter and pressuring Twitter. I think the pressure was more important than the small amount of pay to censor. Like anybody that talks about the Hunter Biden laptop, shut it down. Anybody that talks about how masks don't work and that was all a big lie, shut them down. Anybody that believes that you should have a choice or that talked about natural immunity, shut them down. Well, thank goodness that Elon is there, but that's what the left wants. And the left took it to another level. And I'll get back into that in just a minute. We're going to go ahead and go to our last break. This is Eric Collins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Folks, I try to be hopeful in this last segment, and I do believe there is hope, but we have to move to action. Let's go ahead and come back. This is Eric Collins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. One of the places I think our hope is in the fact that Trump is running against kind of a candidate that keeps remaking themselves. And Kamala recently has remade herself in a kind of special way. I do declare I love a yellow school bus. Suddenly, not only is she no longer Indian, she's suddenly black, but suddenly she's Southern black.
You better thank a union member for the 5-day work week. You better thank a union member for sick leave. You better thank a union member for paid leave. You better thank a union member for vacation time.
So Foghorn Kamala, or I do declare I loves me a yellow school bus. And you know, they're here just in time. And when there's deadlines, it has to do with time.
I gotta say, he goes, I said. That's what he says. I said.
Sure enough. Now, I don't have a problem with the Southern accent, and I really actually like it. What I have a problem with is she's not real. She changes who she is depending on who she's in front of. Well, that's a problem. Recently, getting back to this whole censorship, Robert Reich in the Guardian magazine, so pretty prominent leftist in Robert Reich, and he's respected in the leftist world. And the Guardian is a respected magazine, not respected by me. I think it's a liberal rag, but respected in its circles. And he called for Elon Musk being arrested because Elon is allowing free speech. You know, that scary thing where somebody might say something wrong or say something you disagree with. Yet he wasn't writing this same article when we were told to wear masks, that it was a pandemic of the unvaccinated. So it's only about free speech when it's free speech that they don't like. So that's kind of scary that now somebody that's very prominent, that was in the Obama administration, so very connected to power, is writing, and they're saying the quiet part out loud is, when you disagree with us, you should be arrested. When you disagree with us on free speech. That's why this election is so incredibly important. That's why RFK decided to endorse Trump. That's why Tulsi Gabbard decided to endorse Trump. Because the left now is saying the quiet part out loud, that they eagerly embrace censorship. That they'd rather have a safe space than free speech. You know, who is it on college campuses that set up the idea of a free speech area? We're in the United States. So shouldn't free speech happen across the entire college campus instead of a free speech area? Again, they're letting us know who they are. They'll claim, oh no, we're for freedom, as long as you're saying the right thing. Yeah, they're for freedom as long as you're part of the liberal hive mind. You know, kind of like the Borg, where they all have the collective and they agree. And Harris chose a VP that let Minnesota burn. He wasn't for law and order. You realize that Tim Walz, he was and is the governor currently of Minnesota, and he let Minneapolis burn. He let them burn during the riots that happened with BLM. Do you know that Tim Walz, and this is on video, you can watch, he was about to give a speech, and he decided to take down the state flag of Minnesota and put up a flag from another country, that country being Somalia. Now, Somalia is not a bastion of freedom. There's been multiple civil wars. They're known for being pirates. It's a rough place. And I'm not saying the Somali people are bad, but I'm saying their government stinks. And yet he decided to take down a state flag, put up a Somali flag. Tampon Tim also decided that it was a great, Tim Walz, VP for Kamala Harris, decided to put up tampons in boys' restrooms. Now, if you were sane on the LGBTQ issues, you would need to do that, right? Because the girls would be the ones that needed the tampons. Minnesota's willing to take kids over surgery. Meaning if a kid wants gender-affirming care and they want top or bottom surgery, he's willing to, and they're from another state, he's willing to steal them from that state, take custody. He's also willing to steal them from within his own state, from the parents, and the state becomes the ward of the kid and allows them to have their surgery. He thinks that's a good idea. And Tim Walz is for abortion all the way up to birth. Well, you can't really trust this man. And this is who Kamala chose. She talks like he's a good guy. Well, I think the reason she thinks he's a good guy is because they're part of the same liberal hive mind. But when you watch the two of them together, it's just cringe. Folks, our nation's on a precipice. But the good news is we have a good candidate, one who believes in freedom, who's flawed, but has generally great policies. I really am enthusiastic about Trump's policies. As a man, he's not perfect. Guess what? As a man, I'm not perfect. I know this will be a shock to some of my listeners to hear that I'm not perfect either. Now, my producer's near perfect, but if we ask his wife, she could probably come up with one thing. That's it. She's like, he's almost perfect, but not quite. So we have also got a lot on the line, but we've got a template. You know, the idea, this idea that created more opportunity than anywhere else in the world, that our freedoms are based upon the individual liberty, that those freedoms are enumerated, meaning written out, Bill of Rights, Declaration, that those rights are granted by God so government can't take them away. All we have to do is our civic duty. The minimum is voting. That's for the lazy. The maximum, I don't know what the maximum is, but everybody could get one more person to vote. Could you energize, when you go to church, could you energize your pastor to go, hey, we need to get out and vote? Your pastor doesn't have to tell you how to vote, but in almost all cases, biblical values will lead you towards one party. Now, some of the woke churches, I question what solutions they would have, but if it's a traditional church, it would lead you towards one party. Well, we need to get out and vote. It will make a difference. We can save this country. I want to see this country great again. It's interesting that Joe Biden sees MAGA as the greatest threat to our nation, and he said that multiple times.